Welcome to Prayer Journaling through Bosler Library. I'm Michelle Williams and I'm happy you joined us for Session 4. This session is titled Finding Clarity. In the previous session, we talked about our wish list. We had stories to help us understand our wishes may not always be good or kind. We also had a journal prompt to write about the desire of our hearts. In this lesson, we will use the wish list revealed in Session 3 to help us find clarity. Clarity, according to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, is the quality or state of being clear or easily understood. So what if we take the one desire of our hearts, whatever it may be, and look for a clear, transparent understanding of why it holds that place in our lives? To find clarity, we need to dig deep into the why. A simple question, yet the answer can be very complex. Our goal is not to judge what we find, but have a visible and focused understanding of why we choose, whatever it may be, as the desire of our heart. In Genesis chapters 29 and 30, we read the story of Jacob and sisters Rachel and Leah. Jacob fell in love with Rachel and asked her father Laban if he could marry her. He and Laban reached an agreement. Jacob would work 7 years for Rachel's hand in marriage. When the marriage took place, Jacob believed he was marrying Rachel. However, tradition was the oldest sister should marry first, so during the ceremony, Rachel's father gave Leah instead. Now, Leah wasn't as pretty as Rachel, and Jacob did not have the same feelings for Leah. He went back to Laban and again promised to work for another 7 years in exchange to have Rachel as his wife. A week after he married Leah, Jacob took Rachel as his bride. Laban also gave each daughter a female attendant. Rachel had Bilhah and Leah had Zilpah. Jacob had 2 wives with 2 servants in his first 2 weeks of marriage. God saw Leah was not loved by Jacob, so God gave her children. Rachel, however, remained barren with no children for years, but she remained Jacob's favorite. Rachel became jealous and upset and devised a plan to compete with her sister, who by that time had 4 sons. Rachel offered her husband Bilhah, her servant, as a surrogate wife so she could bear children for Rachel. Bilhah had 2 sons by Jacob. Leah ended up having 6 sons and 1 daughter with Jacob. Still, Rachel continued to pray for children, and finally God remembered Rachel. She conceived and gave birth to a son, Joseph. When Leah no longer bore children, she also gave her servant to Jacob. Zilpah had 2 more sons. Rachel would end up having another son by Jacob. If you're keeping score, that's Team Rachel with 4 and Team Leah with 9. So many children, so much competition and jealousy. Can you see how the behavior of the 2 sisters, along with the 2 servant women, carried over into the dynamics of the relationship Joseph, Rachel's son, had with his brothers? Remember the story of Joseph, who was treated differently, apprised by his mother, beloved by his father, and not having to do the same work as his brothers. And the brothers, their jealousy, the plan to sell Joseph into slavery, the cover-up, and lying to their father to hide their crime. Could these brothers have learned their behavior from watching their mothers? Would the relationship between the brothers been different if Rachel and Leah had learned to resolve their issues long before? The desire of Rachel's heart was to have a son. The reasons behind this desire are genuinely complex. Why didn't the sisters, their servants, or Jacob come to a place of peace or understanding with each other or themselves? Could there have been a long history of dysfunction from generations back to Rachel and Leah's father, or even earlier? We can only speculate. In this session, I want to share about our planet's atmosphere. In the Earth's atmosphere, there are layers: the troposphere, the stratosphere, the mesosphere, the thermosphere, and the exosphere. Each of the layers of the atmosphere have their own special traits. The troposphere is the lowest layer, starting at ground level and goes up about 6.5 miles above sea level. We live in the troposphere, and all the weather occurs within this layer. The next layer is the stratosphere, which starts about 6.5 miles and goes up to 31 miles above the ground. This is the layer in which the ozone is found, and the ozone is what converts UV light into UV energy, turning sunlight into heat. Unlike the troposphere, which gets colder as it goes higher, the stratosphere actually is warmer the higher it goes. This is the layer commercial passenger jets fly because there's very little weather in the stratosphere. The next layer is the mesosphere. It starts about 31 miles up and goes up to 53 miles above the Earth. This is the layer where meteors will burn and temperatures start to get colder. The next layer of our atmosphere is called the thermosphere. This is where UV radiation is absorbed from the sun, yet the air is so thin, despite the amount of radiation energy, feels freezing cold. This is the layer within our atmosphere that most satellites orbit the Earth. The final layer is called the exosphere, the last before getting into outer space. There's no clear upper boundary where the exosphere finally gives way, but is between 62,000 miles and 120,000 miles above the surface of the Earth. 120,000 miles is actually half the distance to the moon. If you've ever been in an airplane or a helicopter or a hot air balloon, you know the view of objects on the ground becomes smaller and smaller the higher up you go. The objects that you recognize as maybe cows, farms, houses, or even skyscrapers become less and less defined. As astronauts reach the upper level of the Earth's atmosphere, the details of objects can no longer be seen. Only the variations of terrain, outlines of continents, weather formations, and the vastness of the oceans. If you've ever seen a picture of the Earth from the moon, the views of the upper atmosphere no longer apply. The Earth becomes a multicolored marble in the vastness of space. Our perspective changes as we enter different levels of the atmosphere and have unique vantage points from wherever we are. The Earth's atmosphere reminds us to look at things from a different perspective. God's ways and views are not the same as ours. To gain full clarity in any issue, desire, or choice, we need to seek God's view of it all. Only seeing our limited view may never allow us to have clarity in order to grow, change, or make healthier choices. For this session, take a look at what you wrote last week about the desire of your heart, your wish list. Then, write down the word why 5 times in your journal. Try to answer why in different ways, not repeating the same response twice. For example, Rachel could have asked herself, "Why do I want to have a son?" and then answer why 5 times. Would she have revealed her deep competition with her sister, feelings of inadequacy, or feeling like God just didn't love her unless she became pregnant? Maybe. I pray you find clarity in your journaling session and gain a better understanding of the desire of your heart. Join us next time when we will talk about assessing time. What do we spend our time doing or thinking? In session 5, we will take an assessment to show where we are focusing our energy and how to carve out space and time for session 6, where we will rebuild our relationship with God. We're happy you joined us for this session of prayer journaling through Bosler Library. I hope you continue to find out more about yourself and a better understanding of God in your life. I also hope you see God working in you, around you, and through you to help you become the person He created you to be.